Hello and welcome to the LSE for this online event. My name is Eric Neumayer. I used to be a professor of environment and development in the Department of Geography and Environment, but currently I'm a pro-director or pro-vice chancellor planning and resources at the LSE. Before I come to introduce our guest speaker for this second in our annual Sylvia Chant Lecture Series, let me make an announcement that I'm incredibly pleased to make, which is that with the considerable help and input by Gareth Jones, a professor in the department and a dear friend of Sylvia's, we have managed to secure a gift from an alum, Etienne Catestin, I hope I got that name right, who studied on the MSc Urbanization and Development in 2009 to fund a Professor Sylvia Chant scholarship. The scholarship provides fees and a stipend with preference for a candidate resident outside the UK, and I can only tell you that Sylvia would be so pleased, so enormously pleased about this, because she deeply, deeply cared about students. Wonderful, just wonderful. So now I am very pleased to be here to welcome Professor Cathy McIlwaine to the LSE today for the second lecture, as I said, in our series organized in memory of our dear colleague, Professor Sylvia Chant. Cathy is Professor of Development Geography and Vice Dean Research for the Faculty of Social Sciences and Public Policy at King's College London, just across the road. Cathy's research revolves around issues of gender, poverty, and violence in cities, especially in Latin America and among migrants in London. In her lecture today, Cathy will discuss the nature of and resistance to gendered violence against women from scalar and interdisciplinary perspectives. For those Twitter users in the audience, the hashtag for today's event is hashtag LSE Truth. This online event is being recorded and, all going well, will be made available as a podcast, subject, of course, to technical difficulties. As usual, there will be a chance for you to put your questions to Cathy. To submit your questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Questions will be submitted to myself and I will post as many as I possibly can to her. Please let us know your name and affiliation, as we're particularly keen to hear from our students, alumni, and incoming students, so please let us know. But now I'm delighted to hand over to Cathy. Cathy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Eric, for the introduction and also for the wonderful news about the Sylvia Chant Scholarship. And I can't agree with you more that Sylvia would be absolutely delighted by that. That's really amazing news. Thank you so much for your wonderful introduction. And also, I'd like to say that I am actually at the LSE. I've walked across the road from King's. I was teaching until 6 o'clock tonight. So I almost feel like I'm doing it in person, even if I'm in the Department of Gender Studies. So just to start, I'd like to thank the Department of Geography and the Department of Gender Studies for inviting me to give the second annual Sylvia Chant lecture, and particularly thanks to Gareth Jones and Hazel Johnson. This is an intensely personal lecture for me to deliver, given that Sylvia was one of my closest friends for over 30 years, as well as my PhD supervisor and a long-time co-researcher over very many years. So it's a real honor and a privilege, and I know that Sylvia is up there somewhere looking down. Before I start, I'd also like to mention Sylvia's family, and particularly her sisters, Adrienne and Yvonne, as well as Michael, Philip, Olivia, Juliet, Rupert, Hattie, and Sylvia's late mother, June, as well as her husband, Chris. I really think this lecture is such a wonderful way to keep Sylvia's memory alive for her family, her friends, and for the wider research community that she really influenced so profoundly. So just want to, my slides don't seem to be moving, but I'm very slowly, my slides are going to be moving. This talk is not a homage to Sylvia, but this lecture would not have existed without her. I would never have done a PhD or worked in this field if it hadn't been for Sylvia's enthusiasm and encouragement. Sylvia taught me so much about how to do research epistemologically and methodologically from a feminist geographical perspective. And we shared many moments together doing research. Here, a whole range of wonderful photographs from our time in particularly in Costa Rica and the Philippines. So I thought it would be really fitting to show these photographs of Sylvia as a researcher and really where it all began for me. These were really formative years of lots of research and also lots of fun. I'll inevitably come back to Sylvia's influence as I deliver the lecture tonight, but I just really wanted to start with some photographs.
Cathy, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it seems that you're not yet sharing. So I think you need to press the share screen so people cannot yet see any photos or anything else you are putting up. And Cathy, if it doesn't, and now I think it's coming, there we go. Wonderful. Now it's up.
There. These are these wonderful photographs that I've just mentioned. I looked through my photo archive. I think Sylvia would have approved of that. She loved photographs. And these are a mixture of photographs from our, as I mentioned, from our days in doing research in the Philippines and in Costa Rica. So as I said, I'll inevitably come back to Sylvia as I go through my talk this evening. But I want to move on to really talk about the nature of what I'll be discussing tonight, and really start by talking about collaborations. Sylvia taught me that collaborations were essential for doing ethical and sound research, particularly when it involved working outside of the UK in the context, particularly of Latin America. So I just really want to pay tribute to all the people who've been partners in the research that I'm talking about this evening. And particularly, I'd like to mention Paul Heritage, Renata Peppel, Yara Evans, Moniza Rizzini Ansari, all of whom contributed so much, and many, many more people as well. In terms of what I want to talk about, this is going to be a very translocal, hopefully very geographical lecture. I will be talking about the nature of gender-based violence amongst Brazilian migrants in the UK, but also in the context of Rio de Janeiro, and particularly a specific community in the north of Rio de Janeiro. This is a community that is, I'll be talking about, is dominated by a range of armed groups and high levels of police violence. But it is also home to 140,000 people. And this is a community of great vibrancy, as well as a community or a territory of 16 favelas of great potency that I will talk about. My final map is of the Latin American community in London, of which the Brazilian population is the largest group, and they're distributed throughout the city. But this relates to some earlier work that that I did prior to working on gender-based violence. So in terms of the argument and the thinking of tonight's talk, I really want to consider the ways in which it's really important to move from mapping gendered violence and revealing its nature in this context in amongst Brazilians in London and in Marais in Rio de Janeiro, and moving to think about from revealing to practices of resistance, and also to think about those resistance practices from the perspective of curation, particularly with a whole range of artists and different art forms, to co-production, again in this translocal perspective. And I will be jumping, I'm sort of warning you at the beginning, I will be jumping from Marais and Rio de Janeiro to the London context. And what I really want to consider are the multiple ways in which we need to think about social science, geographical scholarship, feminist scholarship, curation through working with different artists, and practice, linking very much to the policy field as well. So I just wanted to comment on the title of my talk, which is Painful Truths. And this comes from the words of a Brazilian migrant woman from Minas Gerais in Brazil. And actually where I got the title of the report that Yara and I wrote in 2018, We Can't Fight in the Dark. I'm going to come back to this towards the end of my talk. And basically, Valentina talked about the importance of doing this type of research. We need this type of research in order to be able to fight gender-based violence. We have to be able to reveal the painful truth, but then resist it and shift towards transformation. So this is the sort of the key ideas that I want to talk about this evening. So, and again, thinking about the words of Bell Hooks, moving from painful stories that I will be talking about, but also this really important point that she made, that we have a responsibility not just to portray particularly women from the margins, from the peripheries, as suffering and as stories of pain, but also of hope and resistance, however that may be manifested. What I also want to think about is this need to shift the gaze from the suffering body, from the individual, to also the ways in which structural and symbolic violences are also deeply gendered and implicated in the violence, but also the resistance that women develop. And here I'm engaging with Latin American scholars such as Veronica Gago and Rita Segato. So it's really important to avoid culturally essentialist interpretations of who experiences gendered violence. And here, I just wanted to make one point from this table. Having worked with Sylvia for such a long time, Sylvia loved a table. Our last book together had plenty. She was incredibly fond of them. The point of this table, which is taken from the UN Global Database on Violence Against Women, the point I want to make here is that obviously data on gender-based violence are notoriously incorrect, and they notoriously underestimate the nature of gender-based violence. In this specific case, intimate partner violence. But here I think it is telling that the lifetime experiences of intimate partner violence are recorded in Brazil at 17%, whereas in the UK, they're recorded at 29%. The point here is that although I'm talking about Brazilian women are not the only people who experience gender-based violence in all its multiple forms. Here, I just really want to put down a conceptual marker about conceptualizations of resistance to gendered violence, and specifically gendered urban violence. I really just want to pay tribute to the wonderful work that Latin American feminists have already done on a whole range of forms of resistance, both in the public sphere, but also thinking about resistance to everyday violence as well as intimate partner violence. The types of resistance that are in red are the ones that most closely align to what I want to talk about today. Feminist artivism, which is activism through art, and feminist activism through art, to also thinking about strategies and resistances of the everyday and the everyday politics of women's agency. And all this work relates to different contexts in Brazil, in El Salvador, and in Honduras. So I want to start with the idea of mapping and revealing gender-based violence, and starting with Brazilian migrant women in London. Here, again, I think it's useful to consider Sylvia's work, which very much did reveal a whole range of different types of gender inequalities, particularly in terms of the gendered nature of poverty and female household headship. And this was something which I think she was very committed to throughout her career. Coming back to Brazilian migrant women in London, what we have are incredibly high levels of lifetime experiences of violence in the private, but also particularly in the public sphere. I'll also ask you to remember these figures, because they're going to come back in, I hope, interesting ways towards the end of my talk tonight. What's also really important here is that emotional and psychological violence, almost half of the women talked about this. Also significant thinking about the translocal is that although more than 3/4 of women experienced gender-based violence before they left Brazil, more than half experienced it again in London. Again, on a methodological note, these percentages come from a survey that we did with 175 Brazilian women, mainly cisgender women, and although we did include one trans woman, we included more trans women in the context of Rio de Janeiro. Also, really important point to make that is the importance of understanding gender-based violence as it intersects with structural, symbolic, and infrastructural violence. And this is especially significant for women who have insecure immigration status in London. This leads to them fearing reporting because they fear deportation. And this is used as a control by perpetrators. So women are vulnerable to that in that context. But it also is in the context of a very hostile immigration environment. And so it's also used as a tool of the state. This is state violence. And then this links with a whole range of other issues in terms of English language competence and lack of information. And we can see here that more than half of the women that we spoke to never reported the violence that they'd experienced. The image on the right is also, I will come back to that when I start talking about curation and engagement with artists. But it speaks to the quotation from Christina, where she talks about how she felt trapped. She felt like her hands and feet were tied. She had no way out because she didn't have the documents, and the local council couldn't support her as a result of that. So moving, again, thinking about the translocal, moving to Rio de Janeiro, I think the interesting thing here is that the actual incidents from a larger survey with over 800 women, a lower proportion identified gender-based violence, but with higher proportions identifying it in the private sphere. The key point here is that women often didn't identify the types of violence that they experienced as violence. And so it was often only through talking to them or them engaging with NGOs and women's groups that they then started to actually note and name violence as gender-based violence. Again, we have high levels of emotional violence as well as physical and sexual. As in the case of the UK, I think it's also really important to note that gender-based violence is not a one-off incident, and they're not mutually exclusive. They occur as intersecting and as multiple over women's lifetime. Oops, sorry. Again, thinking about the intersections between gender-based violence and other forms of structural violence, I mentioned at the beginning that the territory of Moray is dominated by these three gangs, the Red Command, the Third Command, and the militia. But as a result of that, it also experiences on a very regular basis police incursions. So in the course of 2 years, there were 71 police incursions into the territory, into the 16 favelas, resulting in 58 deaths. These are mainly of men, but it's also really important that women often have to deal with this as well. It's often their husbands, their sons, their brothers, their cousins, their friends who die as a result of this type of violence. Here, the levels of disclosure and reporting are even higher, more than or almost 2/3, and only 2.5% actually reported to a formal source such as the police. And there's an example here from a woman, Cathy, who talks about her husband trying to kill her. She reported it to the police, and they didn't come back to her until 8 years later. Clearly, much too late. So here, I want to move from the revealing. So the real importance, I think, of research to reveal this type of violence to the curation. And in part, what I've been trying to do with this body of research is counter what we might call data deficits through the social science, through the geographical research, but then also to think beyond that, particularly when we talk about understanding gendered violence, but also creating resistance to that and working through creative, artistic, and what we call counter mapping methodologies. And in part, this reflects decolonial feminist approaches, but also relates to, I've already mentioned, bell hooks, but also wonderful Brazilian thinkers such as Paulo Freire, as well as other more specifically Latin American decolonial feminists. The other issue that I want to move on to talk about now is this continuum of participation in relation to arts-based methods and the ways in which there's an interplay between curating with artists and shifting towards co-production with research subjects. So the first piece of curation that I want to talk about is the development of a verbatim theatre play based on the research that I've just spoken about amongst Brazilian migrant women in London with Gael Lecornec, who is a Brazilian actor, director, and writer, who took the 25 interviews that we conducted with the Brazilian migrant women and created a verbatim piece called Ephemera. And it was a story about a Brazilian migrant woman with insecure immigration status and her interactions with a British woman called Joanne, played by Rosie McPherson. And we showcased the play with 3 performances at Southwark Playhouse, initially in 2017. And then, really interestingly, I told you it was going to be very translocal. We actually took the play and performed it in the territory of Moray and in a feminist theatre festival in South Rio de Janeiro. And we did it in Portuguese and in English. The quotations that you can see here come from the Brighton Theatre Fringe Festival from 2018, where we tried to elicit, or we did elicit, some feedback from the audience. So I won't read through this, but I think the important thing to note here is the way in which this story, which is an amalgamation of the range of the Brazilian women's lives in London, the way in which they speak to, in this case, the Mexican American woman, but also a middle class white English woman as well. Okay. Again, and please excuse the pun, but because of the nature of the ephemeral nature of the verbatim theatre play, we did manage to perform it, I think 7 or 8 times in total. But obviously, this is fleeting in many ways. So it's very easy to develop a very close connection with your audience in this context, but it is ephemeral. So what we did was, Gael did, she created a 10-minute film from the play called Anna, again, also with Rosie McPherson. And we then took that to a range of international film festivals in the US, Croatia, India, and so on. And you can see in the bottom left, Gael won a range of awards for this, which was rather wonderful. I also think it's useful, again, thinking about these engagements as a form of activism. And these are Gail's words herself when she states that, you know, activism has the power to change the future, and that she's always been about creating awareness and the ways in which art can really try and make change and pressure change. I think it's also quite interesting, again, to come back to Sylvia at this point. And I think although Sylvia doesn't necessarily work directly with artists in terms of her research, she was incredibly creative. And I'm sure many of you will remember the wonderful book covers that she created with her long-standing friend in the Gambia, Suel Nachi. And several of the books that I co-authored with Sylvia had these wonderful images on the front. So here, I'm not going to play this video, but I want to sort of slightly shift the ways in which we engage with artists and the role of art as a form of communication. And said, I'm not going to play this, but we created a viral video, partly from the play Ephemera, but we also worked with some animators to basically create a 5-minute viral video whereby we embedded the core findings, the headline findings from the research. We included a whole series of recommendations here, and we targeted this at policymakers. And it's been incredibly useful, actually, for really showcasing the core findings of the research, which was very different, I think, from the more emotional and the more visceral communication from Ephemera and from Anna. I'm moving back, well, partly, I'm staying in the translocal, but I'm shifting to the research that was conducted in the territory of Marais. And the interviews with the women from Marais were turned into an audio-visual installation by the renowned theatre director and artist, Bia Lessa. And she created this amazing multimedia installation for the Women of the World Festival at the South Bank Centre in the Royal Festival Hall in 2018. And we showed this over the course of 3 days in the at the WOW Festival. But also, and this is the image on the right, we also brought 2 women from Moray to the festival, one of whom was a trans woman. I also want to show this. I want to think about again coming back to engagement with campaigns, to engagement with policymakers, and this is a piece of work that I did with this wonderful campaign called Step Up Migrant Women, that's led by a long-standing partner, the Latin American Women's Rights Service. And I conducted, or there was a team of us, conducted the research with women from 22 different countries to really try and capture their experiences as women with insecure immigration status who had experienced gender-based violence. And then this report, called The Right to Be Believed, that you can see, really was then used in the Step Up Migrant Women campaign. And it was particularly used to try and lobby and advocate around the Domestic Abuse Bill, which is now the Domestic Abuse Act. And the campaign did succeed in getting some concessions, although sadly, full rights for women with insecure status were not secured. What we also did with this research is, and this is through the wonderful King's Visual and Embodied Methodologies Network that I co-convene with 2 colleagues, Jelke Boostin and Rachel Kerr, and a whole range of other wonderful people at King's. But then also working with Gael again, and we took some of the stories, or 3 stories from this research, and created an audio piece, a soundscape. And one of the most interesting experiences I had with this soundscape, which was voiced by very high quality sound, voiced by actors, was that we did a presentation to the Home Office, and it was the creative piece. We put it at the end. I did this with the coordinator, Elizabeth Jimenez from Step Up Migrant Women, and so many of the questions related to the ways in which these creative pieces can be used to influence policy. And it's something that I'm incredibly interested in and continuing to work on. Okay, so here I want to move from mapping. I've talked about curating. The work, particularly with Gael, but also with Violetta, was very much the artistic or the artist's interpretation of these women's experiences of gender-based violence. But what I want to shift to talk about is the co-production with women survivors and women who experience gender-based violence themselves. And in some ways, this is paradoxical, because the research that I'm talking about here has all been conducted with our wonderful partners, the Casa das Mulheres, the Women's House in Moray, with the core partners. This is a subsidiary of Redes de Moray, Regis de Moray in Rio de Janeiro. But it's all been conducted from our part in London online, but with our local partners. And it told us, or it showed us so starkly, unless you have very strong relationships and you conduct co-produced research, it just doesn't work. And it certainly doesn't work in the context of this very familiar Zoom picture, the Zoom portrait that you're probably all seeing tonight. So I want to talk about different ways in which this work, and I'll come back to London in a moment, but this work has been shifting and moving towards thinking about how we've worked in a co-produced way to really register feminist counter narratives, particularly in this context about the stigma of coming from a favela territory. Here, we've done some really interesting mapping, which we're still in the process of doing. And I really want to sort of show the shift from mapping the incidents, mapping the reporting and the disclosure, towards a much more collaborative piece of work that we've been doing to really trace particularly women-led initiatives in the territory. So the first two maps that you've seen are very much focused on, or relate to the survey that I spoke with 800 women, and just incorporate actually 15 of the 16 favelas in the territory. And then the one on the right is about networks of support. So the dots in yellow are the community-led initiatives, and the dots in blue are the community-based organizations. So in other words, thinking about the resourcefulness and the power that's coming from this community, but often, again, data deficits, we often don't map this. So this was a form of counter mapping using this GIS technology that we've been developing. I want to come back again to those were much more traditional maps in many ways, but I also want to come back to the art and thinking about ways of trying to capture in a visual way experiences of indirect and direct violence. And so we worked with an artist who sat in on focus groups that we conducted and she did these observational drawings. And I'm just going to share two of them. And I just think they're so interesting because they talk about particularly indirect forms of oppression that these women experience. They talk about women who don't fit normal standards, trans, lesbians, more masculine, poor, lots of pressures that women feel, harassment, and also how people feel. There's a scar. I feel suffocated. But we were also really keen to capture everyday forms of resistance. And so this observational drawing is much more focused on various forms of resistance practices. We've got the meeting about gendered violence in the Casa das Mulheres. We've got women talking about very reactive forms of resistance, putting a nail file inside your bra, but also longer term measures, legal measures, education, talking to children, therapy, and self-care. So we really tried to sort of capture the whole continuum, the whole range of different types of everyday resistance practices, again captured visually by this artist. Here, I want to move on to a very and in many ways more direct form of co-production through body mapping. And this was done with my research team. Would you believe, partly on Zoom? The middle photograph here is a Zoom shot, partly on Zoom and with our local team. Body mapping is a form of body territory mapping, much of which, not exclusively, but much of which comes from Latin American indigenous women's cosmologies, and thinking about the ways in which women's bodies and territories are part of the same ontological continuum. Now, I won't go into these body territory maps in any great detail, except to say that the one on the right is the body territory map of a Black trans woman who talks about very severe violence that she experienced. There's a whole range in the middle of her stomach. She identifies all the weapons that people have used against her, particularly as a trans woman, and high levels of transphobia. But she also talks about resistance. She talks about the Casa das Mulheres, the women's house, and particularly about her friends and how she has developed ways to cope with the violence that she's experienced. The woman on the left is a Black indigenous woman, and she talks about the various forms of violence and how that is written on her body, how that is embodied, the violence is embodied. But she also identifies in her right hand, it's a book. She sees books as resistance. She talks about in her legs, dance and exercise as resistance. So again, some really, really interesting ways around how violence is embodied, but also how resistance is also embodied. Here, I want to move on to a different form of artistic engagement, focusing around what we call social memory technology. And this is through a collaboration with the Museum of the Person, which is an online museum based in Sao Paulo. And they've developed this methodology, which is a form of oral history and collecting biographical narratives, which also relate to wider community histories. And it's very much inspired by the work of Paulo Freire and Augusto Boal. And it relates to where the name comes from, performing this intangible heritage where memories can travel and memories can communicate. And what we did here was we worked with 10 women who were explicitly engaged with the arts in different ways in the territory of Moray. And we actually launched this, I'll show you some examples in a moment, but we actually launched this last week on International Women's Day. And it's part of a wider exhibition called Vidas Femininas, or Feminine Lives. Oops, sorry. So I just want to show you some examples of 4 of the 10 women whose stories that we told through these short videos. That they're between sort of 5 and 8 minutes long. And there's a sort of a lovely title to this part of the online exhibition, which is Stories of Women Who Conquered Their Space, or their spaces, art and resistance. So I'll just go through these really, really quickly. We've got Beatrice, who's a slam poet, who talks about her ancestors, who talks about the favela as the Quilombo. The Quilombo is a slave resistance community in Brazil. But she also talks about necropolitics. Remember, necropolitics and the politics of death in her poetry. So really sophisticated poems. Rafaela is a seamstress and an artisan, and she works particularly to challenge stereotypes and stigma about coming from the territory of Moray. And you can see, hopefully, her T-shirt. She's written in English, made in Moray. And she talks about this logo as being a form of resistance and about communicating what it means to be a person from Moray. Juliana, again, engages as a violinist in a different way. She talks about engaging with music as a healing process, as well as one of self-knowledge. And then finally, Irasi is a singer and a composer, and she talks about the way in which she composes almost like resistance songs. If my world has fallen, let me learn to get up. So they're really, really powerful narratives about their collective and also individual art forms and the way in which they've used that to understand their lives, but also to deal with endemic urban violence, as well as individual and intimate partner violence. So again, very briefly, I just really want to just highlight four issues in terms of the emergence of formal and informal feminist collectives in the territory of Moray, really fascinating transgenerational community knowledge sharing, grandmothers telling mothers, telling daughters about local codes. How do you cope? How do you resist? Also, ancestry reconstruction and self-care, and how this is really linked with what Veronica Gago talks about, potencia feminista, feminist power. We've also done some work on emotional bonds and emotional communities, and the ways in which that feeds into more collective engagements, particularly around, and coming back to one of the maps I showed earlier, women-led community initiatives and women-led community histories. Okay, back to London. And again, back to thinking about co-production and a return. I started the talk with the report that is entitled "We Need to Fight in the Dark." What this work is in the London context, again thinking about the shift from curation to co-production. It's a project working with Migrants in Action, which is a wonderful community theatre organisation directed by someone called Carolina Cal Angusani, and a Brazilian artist called Nina Franco. And they developed this project with me called We Still Fight in the Dark. And what they did through a range of applied drama workshops, using music, writing, poetry, and art, is that they made a film that encompasses different ways in which they worked online and in person. This has all been done in the last 2 years of the pandemic, or actually in the last year of the pandemic. They created poetry. These are 2 poems from 2 of the participants that actually I won't read out because they appear in the film that I'm going to show you in a second, as long as I can get the technology to work. This is just a wonderful photograph from the film. This is the creation of the film. This is the day that we did the filming. Okay, I'm now going to show, it's just over 4 minutes, the film. And again, I think the point before I start to make is that these women made this themselves. Okay, so this is not the artistic interpretation of Gael or Bia Lesser or other people. This is these women's interpretation and the interpretation of my research report. And they critiqued it as well, which is also a really interesting experience for me. And it felt like it very much come full circle. It was returned to these women who are themselves survivors of gender-based violence in London.
You are not welcome.
Oh, Brazilian. I know what you are here for.
You are not welcome.
Who are you?
Não sou bem-vinda.
Go back to where you belong.
I belong nowhere. I don't belong here or there.
Não me encaixo.
Where are you going? Hey.
Stay in bed where you excel.
Medo.
Fear.
Medo de perder meus filhos.
Medo de vingança. I fear deportation.
I shrink.
Não pertenço lá, nem cá. They have the power.
Poder.
Solta. Maltrata, entrelaçadas,
Emaranhadas, maltratadas,
Nós.
I keep you walking. Don't hurt my flesh.
82% of Brazilian women experience some form of gender-based violence in their lifetime.
78% of the violence against Brazilian women and girls in London was perpetrated in the public sphere, especially in the workplace.
The home emerged as the second most commonly identified place where violence against women and the girls occur.
56% of the Brazilian women never reported an episode of violence in London.
82% das mulheres brasileiras sofreram alguma forma de violência de gênero durante a vida. 56% das mulheres brasileiras nunca denunciaram um episódio de violência em Londres.
Nos encontramos nos desejos do afeto, nos desejos de romper a dor. Nos desencontramos na falta de empatia, nos privilégios da cor.
Onde dói a tua dor?
Eu existo, negra. Nos encontramos como mulheres migrantes.
Nos desencontramos no direito de imigrar. Tivemos a nossa história queimada e, com isso, nosso direito de ir e vir impedido. Não sabemos nossa história e tampouco temos ancestrais europeus.
Onde fica a tua ferida mais profunda?
We exist, Brazilian Black Women. Existimos, Black Latina Women.
Nos encontramos na vida, na luta, na força de um movimento. Nossa caminhada não é a mesma. E assim, nesses desencontros, nos encontramos.
To heal, to be.
Okay, so I hope you're able to hear the sound on that, although there were some subtitles as well. And again, the sort of the really key point that I want to take away from that is obviously the women talked about their pain, but the process of this, the top quotation or comment is from a woman prior to being involved. And she talks about she wants this hurt to be taken away from her using the arts, something that feels like a heavy suitcase full of clothes that no longer fits her. The second woman, it was after the film was made, and she talks about how her parents had died when she was young, and she the only picture she had, her uncle took away from her, and she talked about participating in this film, giving her hope and joy, saying that her image is there for everyone to see, and she's going to be on the screen forever. So I just sort of feel this co-produced experience meant so much to these. There was 18 women in the end, but it just meant so much to them because of the co-production alongside broader forms of curation. So the final piece of work that I'm going to talk about brings together various aspects of what this sort of, it's not linear, but thinking about mapping, thinking about curating, and thinking about co-production and women's voices. And this is a podcast project that has been developed with the Latin American Bureau and on the King side with a whole range of people, but on the King side also with my colleague Jelka Boaston. And it's fascinating. It's been a fascinating process. Also because these podcasts are multilingual. They're in English, Spanish, and in Portuguese. And 2 out of the 3 that you see here have been focused on the Women's a Casa das Mulheres and some of the research that I've been talking about, as well as the campaign that I mentioned earlier and the work with migrants in action. And so the podcast had 3 core episodes. The one from Guatemala doesn't relate to my research. But then the other thing that we did is that we had a workshop where we got podcasting people together. This was new for me. And it's a really interesting medium. And I sort of really like this idea about the ways in which podcasting generates intimacy. With the listener, but it's like whispering in someone's ear. And it also is about a way of communicating and of building hope. And the other thing that I should say is that we found out yesterday that we were shortlisted from the Amnesty International 2022 Media Awards. We got down to the last top 10, but we didn't get down to the last top 5, which meant we haven't gone through to the final. But we were up against the Guardian, BBC, and Al Jazeera. So we were very pleased that our little podcast actually at least has been recognised by Amnesty International. Okay, I just want to finish up now and very, very briefly just really sort of reiterate how I tried to trace this shift from mapping and revealing to curating and working with artists in interesting ways, using different art forms, to co-production on this journey from gendered violence to resistance, and the ways in which we can have productive engagements for understanding and resisting, and really thinking about what does this really mean for scholarship, for the arts, and for practice. I've mentioned policy making. And really, I think I would finish with saying that it's very important to really challenge the separation or their autonomy. I've found that the work that I've been doing in this collaborative way has really, it's been really important to work through these interplays along this continuum, again, which is not linear. I'd like to finish though with 2 what I think are wonderful photographs of Sylvia. The one on the left is from her research in Mexico, in Querétaro, where she did her PhD, one of the families that she interviewed. Then the one on the right relates to, it's much more recently, and relates to the work that she did trying to criminalize female genital mutilation and cutting with an NGO that she worked with called GamTrap. And I think it's really nice to think about Sylvia's role. She's been revealing, as I mentioned earlier, she has revealed throughout her career. She's left this amazing body of work about revealing gender inequalities, but also she may not have done it explicitly in her writing, but she looked at forms of resistance and these forms of resistance to really engender transformation in the longer term. So I'd like to finish there. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you very much, Cathy. That was a really, really interesting talk. I mean, I have to say, I particularly like the photos of Sylvia because it just shows her just how full of life she was, and you know, that she went to so many different places to work in, and in each one she tried to really make a difference. So thank you very much for that. We'll now come to some questions. Let me start with Samuel Maffey. I hope I get that name right. He's a student at Leeds University. He or she, I'm not entirely sure, in any case it doesn't matter, and asked the following question. In terms of reporting challenges, is there any mechanism or mechanisms in place in the UK safeguarding protocols or policies which would foster safe or friendly mechanisms for survivors of violence? If yes, are these women briefed on it? Do they know about it? If not, what should be done and by whom?
Okay, really good question. There are some safeguarding measures, but they're only for a specific group of people. So if you have insecure immigration status, in order to stop you becoming homeless, you can access state support. However, the vast majority of women can't access this. And there's so many forms of evidence that are required in order to prove that you've experienced, in this case, domestic violence. It's almost impossible. The vast majority of women who have insecure immigration status also have no recourse to public funds, which is a sort of a British immigration term to say you have no access to any welfare facilities. So these women end up having to go to NGOs who then help them. However, they can only help them up to a point, because if they try to go through the British judicial system, it's more or less impossible for them. So part of the campaign, I don't have time to go through the details, but there's information about in the Step Up Migrant Women campaign website, whereby their whole aim is about engendering safe reporting. They did get a big win with the Police Association of the UK, whereby they have tried to ensure that the police do not automatically refer women who come to them to report violence to the Home Office. It's called a firewall. But the problem is that individual police officers act in different ways. So it's a major challenge when women have insecure immigration status.
Thank you, Cathy. I should already say that we probably will have more questions that I can pose to you, so I'll have to be selective. But let me go with the second one from Catherine Prickel, who is a scholar at Royal Holloway and one of Sylvia's PhD students in the mid-2000s. I'm particularly pleased that she's with us. She says, "Thank you for a brilliant talk. Could you share more about the challenges of co-production, please? What lessons you learned from doing it and anything you might do differently in the future?"
Hi, Catherine. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your question. Co-production is not easy. And I think there are multiple challenges. One of the key issues, I think, is that we think co-production is all about everybody getting on terribly well, about everyone being equal in terms of power relations, and that's absolutely not the case. We had challenges, for example, trying to run a research project from King's, working with local partners, money not getting through, contracts being incredibly complicated, and often feeling like we were in a hierarchical relationship. Coming from an elite institution in London, working with a most wonderful community organization in Rio de Janeiro. So the extent to which this was truly co-produced, I think was challenged, actually. What we have tried to do, and what I didn't have time to talk about, is that this is a long-term partnership. And I think co-production can only work if you have a long-term partnership with an organization, like we do with the Casa das Mulheres, and that we also have plans to continue moving beyond using the research in ways that they can develop policies. So I think in that sense, it's incredibly difficult. And I think the term co-production is bandied around a lot as if it's, going to, you're going to be super ethical just by doing it. It's actually not the case. It's incredibly difficult. And I'm sure, Catherine, that you're aware of this yourself in your own work.
Thank you, Cathy. The next one is from Lawrence Maidment-Blundell, LSE Urbanization and Development MSc alum. Thank you for this amazing talk. Could you please tell us a bit more about the social technology memory? Are the oral histories stored in an archive? And does the museum plan to collect the experience of other women in the future?
Thank you for that question. Yes, so the Vidas Femininas, the Feminine Lives exhibition, it is stored. They are stored in an archive. So as well as the 10 women that we worked with, there are other videos that you can see on the museum website in their exhibition. And so there's women from all walks of life. The ones that we have posted as part of our working with the territory of Moray, they're all in Portuguese and in English. So they're publicly available and you can look at them, but there's lots of women's lives and they will stay there. The aim of this museum is to record people's lives. The other wonderful thing that they're going to do is also they're developing worksheets to work with not local schools, at the national level, to work with schools using these videos, linking it to the research about the nature of gender-based violence and resistance, and get teachers to talk about them in the classroom. I mean, one thing that I probably didn't say explicitly enough is really social memory technology is a form of digital storytelling, but focused very much on memory.
Thank you, Cathy. So the next question is from Mariana Mayumi Hiroki Tamashiro, who is an LSE student from Brazil, and I presume from her surname, she is one of many ethnically Japanese Brazilians. Boa noite, Mariana. Boa noite. Thank you for the amazing presentation. She says, how do you think it's the best way for Brazilian women to find support since they are afraid to report? Through organizations, or how can they find out about these organizations since many are feeling isolated?
Thank you. Another really good question. It is really difficult, and I think actually particularly in rural areas. The territory of the 16 favelas of Moray is very densely populated, and as you saw from one of the maps, there are lots of community-based organizations, partly because of problems with the state that I mentioned, actually providing services there. And what the NGO, what Hedges de Moray and Casa das Mulheres, who we work with, do is that they do a lot of outreach work. And actually, what happened when we did the survey work with 800 women, the local researchers talked about this being a really good way for spreading information and highlighting what gender-based violence was. And then they asked these women to come to they've set up a range of, the other partner that we work with is the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And every Saturday they have a legal clinic with law students, but also law professionals. And women can go there and access legal help for free. And they also have a range of counseling and other forms of support for women. But so that was partly through outreach and then through the survey, but they also do outreach work. And it is really key because the data showed us, that the incidence was lower in Brazil than it was in the case of London, and that's probably not necessarily accurate. So, I mean, I think it is a real battle, and it absolutely is a real issue in Brazil and in lots of different countries. We've got to be careful not to identify this as a uniquely Brazilian issue. It absolutely isn't. But I think the role of these NGOs in the third sector is absolutely crucial here, because often the state, particularly in these communities, is seen as a perpetrator of violence, actually, rather than a form of support.
Thank you, Cathy. I think the next question by Sukanta Banerjee is more along these lines. Thank you for a fascinating talk. Is there any way women and girls, often without legal papers, can access local council safeguarding services and safe homes? Good question, because if they are afraid to, come out as being without legal papers, then how can they access these services?
It's more or less, well, in terms of refuges and safe houses, there is one safe house for all Latin American women, not just Brazilian migrant women, run by an organization called LAWA, Latin American Women's Aid. And they provide that on the basis of donations and contributions. They can't get into the state system because they're not given support. And that was a lot of the lobbying of the Step Up Migrant Women campaign, was actually to get the British state to acknowledge women with this insecure immigration status and no recourse to public funds. So it's only the NGOs and again, the third sector who provide refuges and safe houses for these women. And as I said, there's only one specifically for Latin American women that provides, culturally appropriate services.
Thank you, Cathy. Next one, Kavita Datta from Queen Mary, University of London. Thanks, Cathy, for a great talk. Can you say more, please, as a scholar who has worked on gender-based violence for a long period of time? What are your more recent engagements with diverse forms of arts, artistic methods, or other forms, and what have they enabled you to do?
Hi, Kavita. Thank you so much. Great question. I mean, I think there's lots of different ways depending on the form of the artistic engagement. I think the work where I talked about the role of the artist is taking more center stage. I sort of felt that I had less role in the communication. However, I do think that communicating and raising awareness is possible through using theatre, through using film, in a way that writing an academic paper or even a report in Portuguese is able to do. And I also thought engaging with artists, like in this context, Gael, she looked, and she was obviously Brazilian, but she allowed me to understand the process of gender-based violence in different ways that I may not have thought about. I think working and again thinking about one of the more recent engagements in terms of the film on We Still Fight in the Dark. That was the most amazing experience with these Brazilian women survivors. And I mean, in some ways, that's much more of a therapeutic engagement rather than raising awareness. But the quality of the artistic forms that these women created was really, really amazing. So I think in that sense, it's also about them making a statement to the world of raising awareness about letting their community know. And it's been a really humbling experience to go back to the community. I mentioned in the talk that they critiqued my report. They may have talked about the findings in the report, but they also critiqued it. Said, well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that. And so, and they made sure they put it in their artistic work. So I think, and again, I think different art forms bring different things to different audiences as well. And I think I've learned that it's not linear, and it's not up to me to control it. Actually, you know, it's sort of, you've got to run with it, and it increases their communication, awareness, and a sort of a therapeutic angle as well.
Thank you, Cathy. The next question is also from an attendee from Queen Mary. Olivia Kwiatkowska says, thank you for this talk. I'm Olivia from Queen Mary, and I just wanted to ask, did you find there to be any particular trends in relation to LGBTQ plus identity? For example, more abuse towards trans women, specific trends in queer relationships?
In terms of, in the context of the territory of Moray, we did more work with queer women and, as I mentioned, with trans women than we did in the London context. And what emerged, I think, particularly, I think I mentioned working with trans women with very, very high levels of gender-based violence. And working with the queer women, we did a focus group with 5 lesbian women. And I think what they showed with the project was very high levels of politicization. These were women who were working in their local community. They were involved in a whole range of feminist initiatives. And they also talked about violence in queer relationships as well, actually, and the need to resist these forms of violence. But they were very politicized and really talked about this what I talked about, this you know, potencia feminista. Certainly that's my experience of you know, of working with these women, and several of the women actually in the museum work as well identified as queer, and again use the arts to really talk about you know, talk about their identities and talk about their power and talk about feminism. But yes, certainly they also experienced it in queer relationships. That's absolutely the case.
Thank you, Cathy. The next question comes from Alba Murcia. Thank you for this presentation. I was wondering, what do you think the future of creative forms of resistance is? Do you think that there's a possibility of states or countries, whether Brazil or the UK, moving away from more traditional forms of support for survivors of gender-based violence and funding more creative strategies like you have shown us?
Thank you, Alba. Really great question. I mean, I sort of intimated, I think, that this is ongoing work, and it's something that we're in fact trying to work with now in terms of the Brazilian migrant women project and the film. The next step in that project is we're working with the Policy Institute at King's to develop a tool, a policy making tool whereby we reflect on the creative practices as a way of engaging with policymakers. We haven't done that yet. We're in the process of doing that, but I would certainly like to hope that the creative methodologies that we've been working with actually do draw people in and allow people to understand. The soundscape that we played as part of the Step Up Migrant Women project that I talked about, when we did the talk with at the Home Office, the other thing that came up that was sort of really interesting was actually being able, in this case, to hear the voices of women voiced through actors, and also keep those women safe. The women in the film were very much wanted to be in the film. They wanted their faces to be on the film, but women don't always want that. And so the creative arts allows women to engage in an anonymous way and to communicate in an anonymous way where they might be fearful, for example. And the other thing that came out of that work was a couple of people at the Home Office said, I think this really speaks, this allows us, there's this shift towards thinking about lived experiences, but it's sort of a policymaker's term. It's like the type of work that we've all been doing, including Sylvia, been doing, all our careers is exploring lived experiences. But I think policymakers are starting to discover what a lived experience is. And I think creative methods and creative methodologies actually allow us to communicate those lived experiences in a way that it's all often really difficult to capture in text on the written page.
Thank you, Cathy. So I believe we have answered all questions. So we have one more input from one of our attendees, to which I will come in a moment. And that's because, Cathy, you have been absolutely brilliant in giving short answers to all the questions, because sometimes people give them mini lectures on each question. It takes 5 minutes to answer one question, but you have just been amazing, which is great, because then we can really answer all the questions that there are. So the last one that I want to mention here is Rosalind Jill, who is a scholar and friend of Sylvia's. She says she doesn't really have a question. It isn't a question, it is a statement. Thank you, Cathy, for this powerful and moving lecture. I found the film so powerful, and it really touched me to see what this form of visibility meant for your participants. It truly shows how powerful and life-changing research like yours and Sylvia's can be. Thank you, she says. Not really a question, but I think it's a wonderful concluding statement. Let me then also thank a number of people. First of all, I want to thank the attendees. I know I believe it's a Tuesday night, though in my, everything is a little bit scrambled. I believe it's a Tuesday night, and all of you has probably had a long day. So thank you very much for attending. I want to thank the organizers of the event, Isobel, Nicholas, and others, our amazing team who make this work. I want to thank Gareth, who's put in a lot of time and effort into this lecture series, but also again to say he's really been a driving force behind the scholarship. And I've just thought, have I really thanked Etienne Cadestin, who I don't know whether he is on this call, but in any case, if I forgot to thank you, thank you for your very kind donation. It makes all the difference to us. We want so many more of these so we can truly bring in the brightest students independently of where they have the means. And lastly, of course, I want to thank you, Cathy, our guest speaker. It's been a very interesting talk. It's been a great pleasure to have the opportunity to listen to you. Thank you very much for taking part. We are most grateful you could find the time in your busy schedule to give this second annual lecture in memory of our dear and beloved Sylvia. Thank you very much, Cathy and everyone. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you and bye-bye.